Neo-Nazis on trial. How big is the terror network? An interview with Sebastian Edathy, chair of the German Parliament inquiry.
Mr. Edathy, the long-awaited trial of the far-right terrorist cell, the National Socialist Underground, or NSU, is set to begin in Munich next week. The only survivor of 3 alleged killers is on trial for the murder of 10 people in Germany. 9 of the victims came from immigrant families. It's a trial that's gaining massive attention. What are you expecting from this trial?
The point of these proceedings is for the court to decide if the charges are credible, if the accusations against the 5 defendants, Beate Zschäpe and 4 alleged accomplices, are true. Of course, we politicians will be watching this trial closely. In terms of politically motivated crimes, this is the most important case since the trial of the Red Army faction in the 1970s.
Looking at this trial in Munich now with that in mind, are you just expecting the court to judge the case at hand, or are you expecting more far-reaching insight into how this unprecedented series of right-wing murders could take place in this country?
I think that the court has a different task than a parliamentary investigation committee. Basically, it's the court's duty to decide whether the charges brought by federal prosecutors are true and whether the plaintiffs are guilty as charged. The court won't be making judgments on what failings security authorities made, who failed to track down this ultra-right-wing terrorist group for 13 years. That's basically the job of the Parliamentary Commission that's tasked with addressing the NSU's crimes.
It seems very likely that Beate Zschäpe, the principal defendant, will be keeping silent throughout the trial. Does that mean we should keep our expectations low?
I don't think we should expect to learn too much from the trial. It will depend largely on what the defendants say, if they say anything at all. They're not obliged to make self-incriminating statements. It'll also depend on how much insight can be gained from witness testimony. I think many of the victims' families hope this trial will clear up all unanswered questions. But I think those questions will have to be addressed outside the courtroom. It's not the court's job.
So you don't expect to see the court address the political aspect of this series of murders, which sent shockwaves across Germany when the case first came to light in November of 2011.
No, addressing this case at the political level will take place elsewhere, for one in the Parliamentary Investigation Commission. We're looking at how our police and intelligence authorities could have failed so greatly that this group was able to commit these crimes for 13 years and was only discovered by coincidence in November 2011. It's not the duty of the court to figure that out. The court has to decide whether the defendants are guilty or not guilty. It's our duty to take these mistakes by the authorities that resulted from poor communication and turn them into lessons. It's not the court's job to launch investigations into that or to compile evidence. In the end, that's Parliament's job.
As a member of this investigation commission, you've seen how state and federal intelligence agencies failed in this case. Is it fair to say that they failed completely?
It's my impression that we're looking at a cataclysmic failure of Germany's entire security structures, the worst since the founding of the Federal Republic. That goes not just for the intelligence services, but unfortunately for police departments as well. Our report doesn't come out till summer, but my preliminary finding basically is that 3 factors came together here. The first is a lack of communication between the different authorities. Pieces of intelligence, where they were available, were treated as private property that shouldn't be shared with other authorities. That's not the only thing that went wrong. The authorities massively and recklessly underestimated the increasingly violent nature of the neo-Nazi scene. Also, and I see this as the most serious aspect, the investigations into the murders were not conducted in the unbiased, objective, and professional manner that our citizens should expect. We've observed that the investigations were conducted largely in a prejudiced manner. Investigators had blinders on from the beginning simply because 9 of the 10 murder victims were immigrants. They went into the investigations with the hypothesis that the murderers were mafia or drug-related, and that it was about protection money, organized crime in any case. They only considered the possibility that the murders were carried out by neo-Nazis very late and very superficially.
You say investigators were prejudiced. Does that mean they turned a blind eye to neo-Nazis?
Well, it's clear that they were not sharp-sighted enough when it came to the neo-Nazi scene. I don't want to make sweeping statements, but look, in 2003, that's 3 years after the murders began, investigators were still coming up empty, operating on the assumption that the killers were people close to the victims. But instead of asking whether that might not be the case, 3 years later, they were saying the victims' families had lied to them. Some said, and I quote, that it was the Turkish mentality not to tell the truth. In light of that, it's clear to me that we have people working in some parts of our security agencies, even in some important positions, whose work is tainted by resentment. And that must not be. In a functioning democracy, citizens have to be able to count on 2 things. For one, that the state will do all it can to protect them from crimes. In this case, the state did not do all it could to stop this series of murders by means of better investigations. The second promise by the state is that when there is a crime, that it be investigated objectively and in a sustained manner. That promise was also broken when it came to the victims of the NSU. That's why our work in this parliamentary investigation is so important.
Are you still shocked by the fact that no one seemed to guess for 10 years that the murders were linked? Not just the authorities, even the media didn't speculate about it. That this could take place, and no one seemed to have a clue that it was the work of neo-Nazis.
Eventually, the idea did come to the investigators, although relatively late. They didn't really pursue the neo-Nazi theory until 2006. And unfortunately, the investigating authorities agreed not to discuss the idea publicly. They even agreed to deny questions by the press that there was this idea. So I can't blame members of the press who did ask the police if the crimes could have been hate-motivated, and then got the answer that that had been excluded as a possibility. I can't blame the press, but the authorities acted totally irresponsibly. The investigations weren't conducted centrally, but in 5 different states, by 5 different state attorneys' offices and 6 police departments. And federal public prosecutors weren't informed that the crimes could have been politically motivated. Federal prosecutors didn't even contact the investigating authorities directly. They concluded from reading newspaper articles that the crimes didn't fall into their jurisdiction. So we're looking at multiple failures, multidimensional failures at different levels and in different institutions.
Was it just 3 perpetrators in the end who were responsible for the murders of all 10 people?
Beata Zschäper is not the only person who will face trial at the court in Munich. There are 4 other defendants who are accused of aiding the trio by supplying them documents and weapons. In the course of our parliamentary investigation in Berlin, we haven't received any indication that people outside this trio had concrete knowledge of the crimes. But I do think it's possible that there are other people who helped the 3 main suspects who we don't know about yet. Federal police themselves have informed us that their investigations into that possibility will continue at least into next year, that more eyewitnesses are being questioned, that police are working to shed more light on the trio's associations. It's pretty clear to me that it would be hard to commit crimes like these in a country like Germany for 13 years without logistical support from other people. I don't think we're talking about a group of accomplices in the hundreds. If that were the case, the truth probably would have come to light earlier. But there could have at least been more accomplices than we're currently aware of.
It's mind-boggling that Germany has this neo-Nazi underground. How big is it? How strong do you think it is?
I can only give you the figures we have from our intelligence agents. I hope they're reliable. There are some 20,000 openly organized right-wing extremists in Germany. A few thousand of those are part of the violent neo-Nazi scene. We've known for years that a certain minority among these extremists have discussed engaging in militant activity, in deliberate crimes, including violent attacks and inflicting grievous bodily harm on others. That has to be taken very, very seriously. Our work in the Commission is aimed not just at correcting failures in the system, but also at making sure for the future that our security authorities are more sensitive and more attuned to what's going on, so the early warning systems are effective. Because looking back at the past, at the crimes committed by the NSU, it's clear that authorities did not take the right-wing extremist scene seriously enough, or even that they gave extremists too much freedom. It would make sense to adopt a zero-tolerance strategy here, but it also needs to be ensured that the authorities are well informed and can intervene early. Our intelligence authorities already do that when it comes to observing Islamist extremist networks. Especially following the September 11th attacks in 2001, the authorities took on lots of experts who have their ears to the ground and can tell when certain Islamist circles are becoming more militant before they commit a crime. We need that kind of expertise and broad analysis when it comes to right-wing extremism. That's something we're still lacking. It's not enough just to have the different authorities sharing their intelligence. They also have to find better ways to gather information.
Mr. Edathy, thanks for talking to us.
My pleasure.